What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another video from the 10-7 MMA channel. And today's video is about Dillon Danis, who is about to face KSI in a boxing match in, I think, just over a week. And after that, he's going to fight Tony Ferguson in the GFL. And he's still hoping to make his UFC debut. Now, Dillon Danis is somebody that gets a lot of hype and a lot of buzz and a lot of attention because his trash talk knows no bounds, knows no limits. And sometimes it can be almost too intense, too much that makes people uncomfortable. At other times, it really gets people around him, for better or for worse, whether people want to see him win or lose. But his trash talk is on another level because he will just go to the deepest, darkest depths and does not care. If you remember long ago, he said some really crazy things about Khabib Nurmagomedov, and his team still posts crazy things that are highly offensive. And more recently, in his fight against Logan Paul in that build-up, he mercilessly went after Logan Paul's fiance, who's now his wife and the mother of his child, posting all these crazy pictures. Logan Paul and Nina Agdal are now suing Dillon Danis. So, I mean, this was like beyond trash talk. This was crazy. But it did get people really excited for the fight. Now, what happened after that? He went into the fight and he had a very poor showing. He kind of held his guard up the entire time, was barely offensive whatsoever. I think he said his strategy was to tire Logan Paul out, but he never even went on the offensive whatsoever. And the entire fight was a disappointment. Surprisingly, as disappointing as it was, KSI offered to fight him or asked him to fight him. And now we have another boxing match, which I'm sure not that many people are going to tune into because the last fight was such a disappointment. I will be watching. I am curious to see how it goes, but I don't think a lot of people will also tune in. Anyways, the reason why I do kind of get excited or want to see Dillon Danis not fight boxing, but fight MMA is because when he talks about his MMA skills and his MMA prowess and himself as an MMA fighter and also his jiu-jitsu accolades and skill set, it gets me excited. It makes me think that maybe he could get into the UFC and do some damage. Now, he's also entertaining. I think it would be cool. The UFC, for whatever reason, has not wanted to give him a shot yet. And I just don't understand why, because I feel like he would get great numbers. Now, on this show, on Ariel's show, he talks about why the UFC supposedly doesn't want to take him on. They say that he is too controversial. He'll kick up a big fuss and make a big buzz and talk a lot of trash, but then he won't actually show up to fight. Or at least this is what Hunter Campbell and the UFC brass have allegedly told him. I don't know what to believe because Dillon Danis, I think, is not the most truthful guy necessarily. So maybe it's that. And alternatively, maybe he's just not as good as he says he is. And that's what I wanted to, that's what this video is about, is what's really going on with Dillon Danis. He talks so confidently in interviews about his skill set, what he can do in jiu-jitsu, and how he can just smoke all these guys in the UFC. And all he wants is just a chance to prove it. Now, talking about this interview again, I don't know if he's just making up a lot of the things that he's saying, but he talks about the lengths at which he was willing to go to prove to the UFC that he's got what it takes. He's going to be committed, and he wants to see if he's the best in the world. So when you first watch this, I get kind of amped up, and I'm like, dude, let's give him a shot. Maybe he really is that good. I mean, Conor McGregor did have him as his main jiu-jitsu guy for quite some time. So there must be something to Dillon Danis. So check this out. You tell me what you guys think in the comments about this interview. But when I first watched this, I was like, dang, I want to see Dillon Danis give it a shot in the UFC.
I'm willing to show I'm going to fight 4 guys, whatever, to get into the UFC. How wouldn't I not, like, you know what I mean? And Hunter was just like, no, dude, like, he's going to go in the house, make the most trouble, and then not fight. It's the same thing that Oliver, like, says. So it's like so fucking annoying.
You would have made people actually watch.
I know. It's so funny. Me and Chael have a great relationship, and then they had Colby on there and all the beef I have, all the fighters and all this stuff.
So right now he's saying he was even willing to go on the Ultimate Fighter TV reality show, fight multiple people to earn his shot in the UFC, which is, if that's true, if that's a big if, that's crazy. Because that, I do agree, that would be doing the UFC a favor in a lot of ways. He's so well known that you would get tons of views, and he would stir up a lot of trouble and controversies and fights, and he would do a bunch of trash talk. I mean, people would watch it. Probably would even potentially get better. I mean, I feel like the entire season where Conor was a coach was a bit of a letdown. I think this could even do better numbers than that potentially. So anyways, yeah, that's what they're talking about right now. He was allegedly willing to do this. And if this is true, that's a big if this is true, I think this does show that, hey, he must believe in himself.
And I'm taking the pay
shocked that
cut.
they didn't.
I'm taking no money for that. I don't think they make money. I don't know, do they? I don't know.
Maybe like some small,
small. I'm taking a pay cut, willing to show that this is how bad I want to be in the UFC. Because not saying like I'm begging him, but I want to, at this point in my career, I want to show him the best. That's
Right.
it. That's why I want to fight. I mean, obviously Tony is a former UFC champion. I'm 2-0, but I'm going to fight the best guys. I want to go in there and see if I'm the best at this point in my career. But yeah, so that happened.
Did it get close?
Hunter's tough. I mean, I don't really.
So, anyways, we come to this idea. I mean, that's what he's saying, in my mind, the right things that a talented guy who wants to prove himself would say. I want to get in there and I want to prove, I want to show I'm the best. And so it's like these types of things that gets me excited and says, I do want to see him go into the UFC. I want to see what he's got because he talks so confidently. He does have this jiu-jitsu background. We've heard about it. He talks about it himself. He's trained with Conor. So maybe there's something to this. Okay. Now let's go to the flip side. So is it that he is sincere, or is there something else going on? Okay. And I'm going to go back to a clip from during the build-up to when he was fighting Logan Paul. I don't remember exactly when this was. This is October 10th, 2023. So almost a year and a half ago. They did this really interesting segment where they strapped him up to a lie detector and they asked him all these crazy questions. And what was so weird, okay, they asked him all these questions about things that he has said that people just thought were total nonsense. Like, are you nervous for the fight or different? I think he actually failed that one, and he passed a lot of the questions where people definitely thought he was lying. And I think he is. I mean, what he's saying is nonsensical, but just watch as an example. So let me show you what's going on here. Listen to the question they asked.
Next question is, can you beat Francis Ngannou in an MMA match?
Yes.
Telling the truth there.
You said yes immediately. What makes you so sure?
It's easy. Heavyweights are known to be the worst of all time. So it's an easy guard pull and then into a triangle armbar, omoplata. He has no technique, so I would submit him in under 2 rounds, easily. And John Jones too. Probably in the same.
He said he would beat Francis and John Jones. I think he was about to say in the same night, but he passed the lie detector. So what's going on, right? He's talking so confidently before about his skill set that he wants to prove he's the best, and it's kind of believable. Now they got him strapped to a lie detector test, and he's saying it with a straight face, and he's passing the lie detector. So is he just this insane, incredible talent that we're just waiting for him to make his debut in the UFC, and he's just going to steamroll everybody? He's going to beat Islam Makhachev, like he says. And again, Dillon Danis is somebody who fights at welterweight. Maybe he'll fight at middleweight, but probably welterweight is where he's going to continue to fight. He's claiming he can beat John Jones and Francis Ngannou in the same night. So is that the case, or is something else going on? All right. So he's somebody that I think a lot of people look at as a bit of a pathological liar, and it's either that or he's just we have no idea what's going on, and he's this unbelievable undiscovered talent. So then I was like looking up, okay, well, how the heck is he passing the lie detector? What's going on? Then I found this video. Check this out. This is about narcissists being able to pass lie detectors. Check this out.
I think a lot of narcissists could pass a lie detector test because you have to believe the lie. For a narcissist to get to the place where they've gaslit themselves so much, where they believe the alternate reality that they've created, I think there is the possibility that they could pass a lie detector test. Because if I operate in a place of truth, then my whole mind, my whole mantra is going to end up believing that. And so I believe my reality and I believe my fantasy. And the only thing I have to worry about is just switching back and forth. As long as I can manage switching back and forth, then I can actually live in fantasy and say, hey, this is truth. Everything over there is a lie. And then I can switch over and be like, hey, here's reality. Everything in fantasy is a lie. And then as a result, I'm not actually lying in my reality or in my fantasy. It's just the jump that I have to get back and forth. More video on that.
So I don't know if that makes sense, but I think what he's saying is it's almost like in certain cases with narcissists, and is Dillon a narcissist? I have no idea. This is just something that may offer an interesting explanation and as to how the hell he really believes that he could beat Francis Ngannou and John Jones in the same night. But again, it's almost like he's so engrossed in his own lies that he's built like a fantasy world, and he's just conditioned himself to believe these lies, and then he's actually believing them because maybe that's easier to accept than reality. which may be in fact that he's a mediocre MMA fighter, not a very good MMA fighter. He was 2-0 in Bellator, but the guys he fought, I don't know if you ever saw his fights, but they didn't look like the best fights. His striking looked pretty bad in general, and maybe it's improved. I don't know. He doesn't also seem like a guy who's dialed in and training hard. He also talks in that Ariel interview that he hasn't really even barely had a camp for this boxing match. Like, he just doesn't seem as though he's taking training very seriously. But anyway, so maybe this is a possible explanation. Now, the final thing I'm going to end on is a really good interview of Gordon Ryan coming on Ariel Helwani show, somebody who's a master of jiu-jitsu, one of the probably the most well-known jiu-jitsu player on the planet, or one of the most well-known. And this is the background from which Dillon Danis comes. And I thought it was really cool because I always hear Dillon Danis talk about his jiu-jitsu accolades. A lot of people give him props as a great jiu-jitsu practitioner. But then now you hear Gordon Ryan come in, and I feel like he kind of sets the record straight, which leads me to believe that maybe all of Dillon's talk and all the lies and everything like that, perhaps it is coming from like some sort of personality disorder, whether it's narcissism or something along those lines, where he talks so confidently because he's put himself in this fantasy world. He believes his own lies. That's why he's passing the lie detector test. That's why it sounds like a really convincing or somewhat convincing that he could come into the UFC and do some damage when it's all just a fantasy that he has built. Because check out what Gordon Ryan has to say when he talks specifically about Dillon Danis as a jiu-jitsu practitioner.
He manages to stay in the public eye, not really having any credentials or skills of any kind. Like, he's never really won anything big. Like, he won Nogi Pans. Like, he was decent at one point in jiu-jitsu. There was always a point where he was competing with the best guys, but he could never really beat the best guys. Like his record at black belt is 18-16. And we always had this kind of beef going back and forth. We competed. We actually had a relatively close match. It was when like he was at his near his peak in jiu-jitsu, and I was kind of just breaking onto the scene. We had a match in ADCC 2017, which I won. And ever since then, we kind of been going back and forth. He won't really 100% acknowledge me, and he changed the subject like you saw because he's I guess more famous than me. So if he does acknowledge me, he can't argue with me on facts and statistics. So he just knows that if he mentions my name, if anything, I'll get more popular because of him mentioning me. So I mean, I don't have a problem with Dillon. More power to him. He makes things happen without actually doing anything. Like, he's a master of getting himself into big matches and then pulling out or just not he doesn't do anything athletically. And he keeps getting these big matches and keeps staying in the public eye. So yeah, I mean, I'm nothing against Dillon. He's just he's not a real athlete.
That's his take. Basically calls it out, basically saying that even his skill set is overhyped, not a real athlete. What does he say? He's basically saying Dillon's a giant fraud. So there might be a lot of you guys who are like, yeah, duh, obviously Dillon Danis is a fraud. Just listen to him, watch what he did against Logan Paul. How are you even questioning this? And maybe I'm late to the party, but I think this gives me pretty solid confirmation, taking it in addition to the lie detector result, in addition to his performance against Logan Paul. He's been out for a long time, the way he lives his life. I think we can kind of finally put this whole thing to rest. I guess we'll see what happens with Tony Ferguson too. I'm actually very curious about that fight. That fight will say a lot. That fight will say a lot. But now I've come to this conclusion where I think, yeah, maybe he's got some sort of personality disorder that's allowed him to pass the lie detector. It's also what allows him to sound so somewhat convincing on these shows where he is talking about this great skill set and that he's going to steamroll everybody in the UFC. But at the end of the day, there's just nothing really there. And maybe that's the real reason why the UFC doesn't want to even give him a shot, because he just doesn't have the skill set. He's not good enough to compete at the highest level in the UFC. So there it is. There's the video. Final conclusion, perhaps some sort of personality disorder, more or less. He is not who he says he is, I think, in the world of mixed martial arts and that skill set. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Click that like button if you did like this video. Make sure to click subscribe if you want to see more from the 10-7 MMA channel. Thank you guys so much for joining, and we'll see you in the next video. Take it easy.